patient was given to me who didn't speak. He had a reaction from the Vietnam War where he had stopped speaking. And I was told to just get him to say 4 words coherently. Anyway, this man came into my group. I was doing group psychotherapy, and he started going into like ranting, and not speaking, but hyperventilating and screaming and just yelling, and I just yelled at him. At that instant, by the way, I knew exactly what his problem was. It was wild. His name was Emanuel. And I knew, by the way, I'm working on a book now, and I'm writing up this story in detail, this particular part of it. I'm doing another book on counseling. You can pray about that for me, but this story in detail, I'm not going to go into it in detail now. His name was Emanuel, and I sat there, and he hadn't spoken in several years, and I knew this man believes that he's God. And so I said to him, Emanuel, what is it? Get it out. And he just screamed and shook his head, get it out. Then I just screamed at him, get it out, Emanuel. And he screamed out, I'm Jesus Christ. And I pulled out a little pocket New Testament I had in my pocket, and I had just read for the first time, or the second time, Matthew 24. Just read it. And it said, do not believe anyone if they say, here is the Christ, or there is the Christ, for like lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. And I read that to him, and he stopped completely. And he said, where did you read that? Where did you read that? I should have quit while I was ahead. So that's in the Bible. Read it. For 1 month, this man did not say a word to me. Didn't hyperventilate, didn't scream, didn't shout. Came to the group every day. Months later, I hear a knock on my office. I open the door. Manuel standing there. He shouldn't have been there. He should have gone through my secretary. That was never supposed to happen. He got there to my office. He was on the ward, you see, at the hospital. He's one of my patients on the ward. And he said to me, I want to become a Christian. Now, I hadn't said a word to this guy, other than the verse I read to him. By the way, this is the way it was for me in the early days, 16, 17 years ago. And I stood there. Suddenly, the realization of what was happening hit me. He wants to become a Christian. If I do this, what happens to me? And so I looked at him and I said, when do you want to become one? He said, right now. And I thought, oh my, what do I do? I lead this man to Christ. What happens to me? What happens to my work, my job? I mean, they hate Christianity there. They hated it. And then a thought came through me. The thought was, do you really believe what you say you believe? Do you really believe that the salvation of one person is more important than even your job? That prayer from the month earlier when I said, you can have my job. And I thought, if I don't do this, I'm a liar. I don't believe it. I don't believe it, what I say I believe. I don't really believe it. I know if I had not done it. And then I thought, well, maybe you could bring him to the pastor. But no, he said, right now. Who knows what happens by the end of the day? Bring him to the hospital chaplain. The guy was a rank pagan. And so I brought him into the office. I shared the gospel with him. Got down on our knees. He began weeping and crying and repenting of his sin. He went up on the ward, rejoicing and praising God and sharing his faith with everyone. Doctors, nurses, staff, and patients. When I walked in the next morning, the director of the hospital greeted me. He said, Rich, I've been here 31 years, and I've heard some crazy stories. but I've heard the craziest story I've ever heard in all my days on this ward. I said, well, Howard, let me hear it. You know, that's our business. Crazy stories. Let's hear it. Well, Rich, this crazy story involves you. And the amazing thing was, I still had no idea what it was at that point. I was having headaches every day when I went home from work. I knew that I was serving two gods. I was serving the God of psychology, and I was serving the Lord Jesus Christ. And I knew that I couldn't serve God and Mammon. I couldn't serve two gods. That night when I went home, it was the night before when I led this man to Christ. It was the first night of peace and restful sleep that I've had in the whole 8 months that had preceded it since I'd become a Christian. And it happened the week before I was to receive tenure and a substantial raise from which they could not fire me for almost anything. I don't know what it means. I don't know if once you have tenure at the medical center complex, I don't even think sleeping with your patients, because that was not really considered totally outrageous. If you had good psychotherapeutic rationale for doing it, they allowed that. I think, that wasn't considered a no-no, especially if you did it discreetly. I don't know what they could have fired me for. This is a week before God's timing. I've often thought if it's been 10 days later, I may still be there, because they couldn't have gotten rid of me. But anyway, they asked me if this was true. They told me the account, what they were hearing on the ward. No one once said, the guy's speaking, he's in his right mind, he's talking coherently. No one thought that. All they thought was, this guy's going around evangelizing. You've turned him into a Jesus freak.
Reminds you of the town in Acts.
That's right. In not only Acts, but the accounts of several demoniacs who were in their right mind, clothed in their right mind. Yeah. What do the Jews say?
Yeah.
Get away from us. We don't want any of this around here. You send demons into the pigs, and this guy. They don't look and see this guy who's been slashing himself, is healed. They don't look and see this guy is in his right mind, talking. They don't see that this guy a few years later is going to become a missionary. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the guy who went down to Lynchburg, Liberty Baptist College. We left the hospital together. He went to Bible school, got married, became missionary, had kids. They didn't think about that. All they thought was, this is weird. They gave me a choice. They said, look, we don't want to get rid of you. It wasn't, it was not an easy choice selecting you. It was select you to start this all over again. If you promise us that you won't speak about this again, we don't care. Now listen what the temptation was. See, now it was out of the path that I was Jesus freak, as far as they were concerned. For the 8 months, I had been very timid. I locked myself in my office with my Bible. I never had lunch with any person there. My lunch hours, my free time was spent reading the Bible and praying. I didn't talk, so I did my psychotherapy. Apart from that one thing, and I had an intern sitting next to me that I was training while I did that. I kept an empty seat in my group therapy. Didn't tell anyone about it, which reminded me that the one who was invisible was with me, the Lord. That was the only things that I was doing openly. And so I was hit with the temptation. It was very interesting when the temptation was, if you promise not to speak about this, and you can do it at your church, you can do it at night, you can do it anywhere you want, just promise us you won't do it again here, we'll get rid of him. We'll send him to another hospital. He'll get a series of ECT, and that's electroconvulsive therapy, and he won't remember it, and you won't remember it, and it'll be done with.